Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into what is honestly one of the most profound and terrifying shifts in human history. We're going to unpack the converging, existential threats of biological weapons and natural pandemics. And we're going to do it using verified intelligence data, recently declassified reports, and deep scientific analysis. Look, our world is more interconnected and, frankly, more fragile than it has ever been before. And today we are exploring a very real possibility. The idea that the next massive global catastrophe might not arrive with the visible, loud drama of tanks rolling across a border or missiles falling from the sky. No, it could arrive entirely invisibly, in a single breath, in a handshake, or from a quiet laboratory accident. This is the dawn of the bioweapon century. So let's ground ourselves right away with a number that is just absolutely devastating: 7 million. That is the official, documented number of lives lost globally to COVID-19. But, the human reality behind that number is even heavier. When you look at the excess mortality data, it suggests the true death toll is likely closer to 20 million people. 20 million. I really want us to sit with that for a second, to remember the staggering human and emotional cost of our biological vulnerability. Because this wasn't just a statistic, right? These were millions of families completely shattered. We're talking about an economic cost of over $12 trillion in just the first 2 years alone. We saw cascades of educational losses for our kids and healthcare systems that are permanently scarred. COVID-19 was essentially a massive stress test for humanity, and it revealed some glaring vulnerabilities that we've mostly preferred not to look at. And yet, here we are, 5 years after the pandemic began, and this absolutely crucial question remains definitively unanswered. Where did it come from? The fact that humanity still does not know exactly how its deadliest recent pandemic started really sets the stage for our entire investigation today. It's a mystery that has totally divided the world, and honestly, it highlights a massive global biosecurity failure. Okay, let's move on to Section 1, the unsolved origin. We're going to look at the lab leak theory versus natural spillover. Right at the heart of this origin debate is a massive ongoing tension. We've got two very different perspectives here. On one hand, you have the intelligence community. In early 2025, the CIA declassified an assessment concluding, albeit with low confidence, that a laboratory incident in Wuhan was the most likely origin. The FBI and the Department of Energy have reached similar conclusions. Plus, there's a massive 520-page U.S. House Select Subcommittee report that documented how risky research was indeed funded there prior to the outbreak. But then you have to look impartially at the scientific counter-evidence. Many of the world's most respected virologists point to genomic data and epidemiological mapping that strongly link the earliest cases to the Wuhan seafood market. They point to evidence of the virus naturally jumping from animal hosts like bats and pangolins directly to humans. The tricky part? Neither side has absolute irrefutable proof, and that's largely because an independent, transparent investigation on the ground just hasn't been possible. What this debate has really done is expose an underlying, terrifying issue in modern science. We call it the dual-use dilemma. Now, you've probably heard of gain-of-function research. The whole goal of this research is to understand how a pathogen might mutate naturally so we can develop vaccines and therapeutics before a crisis hits. It's meant to save lives. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. The exact same research designed to protect us from pathogens gives scientists the knowledge, the tools, and the techniques to engineer devastating bioweapons. If you understand a virus well enough to cure it, you understand it well enough to weaponize it. It's the ultimate double-edged sword. Which brings us to Section 2. The broken treaty. Let's see where international law stands 50 years later. So when the Biological Weapons Convention, or BWC, entered into force back in 1975, it was hailed as this historic achievement. It was literally the first treaty to ban an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. But the cracks started showing almost immediately. Look at 1979. There was an accident at a covert Soviet facility in Sverdlovsk that released anthrax, killing at least 66 people. Despite actually signing the treaty, the Soviet Union secretly maintained biopreparat. This was a massive offensive bioweapons program that employed tens of thousands of scientists. Now fast forward to December 2024, and we see Russia deliberately derailing consensus at a crucial BWC meeting. They are effectively fracturing the very mechanisms that were meant to foster international cooperation and keep us safe. I want you to read this quote and really let the gravity of it sink in. This is from Leonardo Bencini, Italy's chief BWC negotiator, speaking at that disastrous December 2024 meeting. If a biological weapon were to be used tomorrow, we would be caught completely unprepared. This underscores the chilling reality of our current situation. The BWC is a treaty that has absolutely zero mechanisms for inspections or verification. Think about that. Unlike nuclear treaties, which have the IAEA actively inspecting facilities around the globe, the BWC operates purely on an honor system. Pure trust. There are no mandatory facility declarations. There are no penalties for cheating. We are entirely, fundamentally unequipped to verify who is building what. And as you might guess, that blind trust is being utterly abused. This declassified U.S. data from the April 2025 Arms Control Compliance Report lays it all out. Major global powers are actively defying the treaty right now. The U.S. State Department explicitly assesses that both Russia and North Korea currently maintain active illicit biological weapons programs. On top of that, Iran and China are engaging in research activities that raise some very serious compliance concerns regarding offensive intent. So we're not talking about Cold War history here. We are looking at a world where state-level bioweapon programs are a present, growing, and incredibly dangerous reality. Let's move to Section 3, when AI meets biology. We're going to talk about how the barriers are lowering. Okay, this is where biosecurity experts are sounding the loudest alarms. We are currently witnessing a terrifying convergence of artificial intelligence and biological engineering. In the past, creating a bioweapon was incredibly hard. It required massive, state-level infrastructure and rooms full of PhD-level experts. Not anymore. Today, step 1, AI protein structure prediction models, like AlphaFold, are accelerating biological research exponentially. They map out the building blocks of life in seconds. Step 2, large language models can now potentially guide a user, even someone without a deep science background, through the highly complex steps of identifying mutations that could increase a pathogen's lethality. And finally, step 3, that digital data can literally be emailed to commercial DNA synthesis companies to print the actual genetic material. AI is dramatically lowering the technical barriers. It is opening a door that allows non-state actors, be it terrorist groups or lone extremists, to potentially design and synthesize biological agents from their laptops. The everyday reality today is that the genetic building blocks for dangerous pathogens can virtually be ordered online. Now, of course, legitimate pharmaceutical research heavily relies on commercial DNA synthesis. It's a miracle for modern medicine. But the global screening protocols, the Know Your Customer checks that are meant to ensure buyers aren't secretly ordering genetic sequences for deadly viruses, are entirely inadequate. They are wildly inconsistent from country to country. Basically, the rapid pace of synthetic biology is just vastly outrunning our global governance frameworks. The science is sprinting, and the regulations are barely crawling. Which brings us to Section 4, dismantling defenses. Let's look at America's weakening posture. Before we talk about policy, I need you to look at this number. 60%. This is a staggering, terrifying figure. This isn't some hypothetical AI-generated supervirus. This is the human mortality rate for the H5N1 avian influenza, a virus that is existing and circulating right now in nature. To put that into perspective, remember that COVID-19 had a case fatality rate of around 1 to 2%. H5N1 kills more than half of the human beings it infects. Historically, we've been lucky because it hasn't transmitted easily from person to person. But recently, it has been adapting alarmingly in mammals. It's showing up in cattle and pigs globally. If H5N1 mutates to achieve sustained human-to-human transmission, the catastrophe we would face is frankly incomparable to anything we've seen in modern history. So, with a 60% mortality virus adapting in nature, state actors building bioweapons, and AI lowering the barrier for terrorists, what are we doing? Well, in a jarring juxtaposition to all these rising threats, the U.S. is systematically dismantling its early warning systems. The proposed fiscal year 2026 budget actively zeroes out the $240 million hospital preparedness program. This was a critical system built after 9/11 specifically to help our hospitals handle mass casualties and pandemics. On top of that, global USAID biosurveillance programs have been slashed, and the CDC has gone curiously quiet on these emerging threats. So while the intelligence community is practically screaming about foreign bioweapons, the actual physical infrastructure required to defend our communities against the next pandemic is quietly being stripped away. Now for Section 5, Scenarios for Tomorrow. Let's look at the 3 paths forward. Based on all this intelligence and data, experts agree we are facing 3 distinct, catastrophic scenarios over the next decade. First, a natural pandemic. Imagine H5N1 finally achieving that human transmission, hitting a world where the political will for public health measures has totally eroded, and our early warning systems have been defunded. Second, we face the threat of state-targeted bioweapon use. A rogue nation with an active offensive program deploys a biological agent knowing full well that attribution is incredibly difficult and treaty enforcement is non-existent. And third, the AI-enabled bioterrorism scenario. A non-state actor bypasses those inadequate online screening protocols to engineer a mass casualty event. What's truly scary is that all three of these paths converge on the exact same endpoint, a global healthcare and political infrastructure that is entirely unprepared to catch the fall. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Yes, the situation is incredibly serious. The world isn't broken, but it is incredibly fragile. COVID-19 was our warning. It was a stress test that we barely survived. But here's the thing. The tools to secure our future already exist. We can modernize the Biological Weapons Convention. We can establish strict global DNA synthesis screening. We can actually fund our hospital and pandemic preparedness programs. We literally have the science to prevent this. So the profound question isn't whether we can stop it. The question is, do we have the human will to act together right now before the next catastrophe becomes the one we simply cannot stop? Thank you so much for exploring this vital topic with me today.